just for a little brief introduction, for those who aren't familiar, Cephas Johnson is he's the uncle of Oscar Grant. And those who aren't totally familiar with the story of Oscar Grant, I'm going to assume you know a little bit, but just to roughly go over, he was killed by the BART police, the transit police in Oakland in 2000, basically New Year's Eve, 2009. And this was at a time, before there was a mass movement around this issue that we've kind of been seeing over the last 6 years. But this case was like one of the bigger fights, in that period before Ferguson. And, kind of one of the things that, it's been a symbol of this fight in many ways. So definitely would like you to kind of maybe run down some of that story for folks and some of just the story of the fight itself. And one of the things that distinguish, this fight is it's one of the few where a police officer actually was charged with anything and actually did some time in prison for what he did. So that was Officer, I'm going to mispronounce his name, Jason, excuse me, Mercel, is it? I'm going to unmute you so you can speak. Sorry. All right, there we go. Thank you.
It's,
welcome.
Johannes. I got an echo. It's Johannes Meserly.
Okay, Johannes Meserly, yeah.
Yes.
So he was the one who fired the gun on Oscar, and Oscar was, he was handcuffed. He was on the ground. And then one of the things about this case that kind of made it different, especially at the time, was it was one of the few that was recorded, on a handheld phone. So it kind of went viral kind of before viral was a thing. And definitely that played a role, I think, in at least how far the fight was able to get. But there were other officers involved, and I know that's part of what you're currently involved in right now, trying to see if we can hold some of these other officers, at least one in particular who was involved, accountable for his role in the death of your nephew. So, I mean, the other side of the story, for those who aren't familiar with Cephas Johnson, he's also known, fondly as Uncle Bobby. He's really, I mean, he was one thing, when these tragedies strike families, it strikes families different because all families aren't necessarily in a position, whether it's their wherewithal, their understanding, their education, or whatever, their personal resources to fight back and take this fight on. But yourself, Cephas played this role for his family, especially when his sister was really, overcome with grief in the wake of the loss of Oscar. But has really become, a leading light for many families affected, and has definitely played a spearhead role in this era of really helping to unite families across the country who've gone through this. And I've definitely had the pleasure of, attending some of the events that you've organized. But that aspect of what's going on too, it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts and your comments on it, because in my opinion, it's kind of like a historical development. It's tragic, but also it's encouraging in the sense that we're starting to see something that I've never seen happen before. Just families uniting all across the country and really starting to kind of become one fight, one common fight for justice. So, and embodied in the name of the group that you lead, Families United for Justice. So, I guess I just wanted that by way of introduction, everybody want to welcome Cephas, and then if you want to comment a little bit on just the case and some of the developments, and then we can open it up for questions as well. But thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate you, giving us your time.
Well, thank you to Brock, and of course, most definitely to all the families there in Boston and in the surrounding areas that have experienced this traumatic pain of losing a loved one to police. And so, of course, we stand in solidarity with those families there, many that I haven't got to know yet, and some that I do know. And thank you for your leadership there too, Brock, for working with families and, just connecting the dots because these are not isolated situations. This is systemic and it goes, to the core of policing. But what I'll do is I give a backdrop of who I am, and what had happened, where we at today, and then of course my cautiously optimistic view of the future. So, of course, on January 1st, 2009, at the Fruitvale BART station, my nephew Oscar Grant was murdered by Johannes Mesley. It happened about 2 a.m. early New Year's Day, that January 1st. And many of you may know or may not know that same night, around almost the same time, all within 8 hours, Adolph Grimes was killed in New Orleans, and Robbie Tolan actually lived, but he was shot in the back, just like Oscar. Again, 22 years old, Oscar 22 years old, and Adolph 22 years old. All three shot the same night, all within 8 hours. All hadn't done anything wrong. And of course, 19 days later, Obama was inaugurated. Anyhow, we were drunk with joy, and really tend to miss what was happening with these shootings. So, of course, when Oscar was murdered on that platform, the community of Oakland, who embraced us as a family, stood with us, cried with us, ran back and forth to court with us, prayed for us, prayed with us, but most importantly, shouted, "I am Oscar Grant." It was that community that caused, for the first time in California state history, that an officer was arrested, charged, convicted, and sent to jail. Now, I want to be clear, we don't count that as a victory because he only did 11 months. And the officer that was the main corporate in it never was charged. And matter of fact, we have the case reopened now in hopes to get him charged. And you're right, Brock. That was the first time technology really played a serious role in identifying and showing to the world just how heinously police officers act. So young people on that train that saw Tony Peroni doing what he was doing before Johannes Mesley murdered him, they uploaded that video to YouTube, social media, where millions viewed it within a few days and was shocked. And that galvanized, as you know, the Bay Area. The Bay Area is already rooted in activism, but the Bay Area rose up. Everything that you see happening across the country happened right in Oakland first. And I mean, from the activism to the everything that you see happening today originally happened in Oakland. Of course, because of that uprising and rebellion, Johannes Mesley was arrested, charged, and convicted. He only did 11 months. He was supposed to do 14 years because the jury came back with a guilty verdict on the gun enhancement charge, which is 10 years. But they also found him guilty of involuntary manslaughter, which is only 2 years, max 14 years. Oh, I'm sorry, 2 years, max 4 years. With that gun enhancement would have been 10 years. So a max he could have done was 14, or the minimum he could have done was 12. But the judge threw the gun enhancement off the table, reduced his time down to, the 2 years, low term, is what the judge wanted them to have, and then gave him 2 days served every day in jail prior to the actual trial, which reduced his time down to 11 months. So he only did 11 months. Of course, he's out, probably working for a policing agency, done changed his name. That's the history of Johannes Mesley. But the Bay Area community, as you know, rose up. And of course, that same community that rose up and shouted, "I am Oscar Grant," is the same community that morphed in to Occupy Oakland, which was huge. And of course, as Occupy Oakland began to settle down, it morphed into today what we know as Black Lives Matter. So the transition of everyone that was in the Oscar Grant movement went to the Occupy movement. And then from the Occupy movement, many then, of course, became aligned with the Black Lives Matter movement. Elisa Garza, one of the founders, Patrice Cullors, one of the founders, and of course, Opal on the East Coast. Elisa Garza lived 3 blocks from where Oscar was murdered, and Patrice lived in LA, but was a part of the Oscar Grant movement. Uh, and the idea of Black Lives Matter was coined at the time Oscar was murdered. And Elisa definitely will tell you herself that Black Lives Matter was created then when Oscar was murdered. It just hadn't got its national name until Trayvon Martin was murdered. So just have to understand the history of it. And I usually always say, think about Emmett Till, how he was the flashpoint of the civil rights movement. Oscar was the flashpoint of the Black Lives Matter movement that we see today. And then all the activists and all those that was a part of the movement in Oakland at that time period went to Sanford, went to Ferguson, went to Chicago, went to South Carolina. These are Walter Scott, the Laquan McDonald's, Trayvon Martin. And they took their political wits with them, and they began to have teach-ins. So all across this country, what we see happening today is not by no accident. It is just a progression of us taking what we've learned with the Oscar Grant movement and going out into the nation and sharing that information, because that's what really created the storm that we saw happening with George Floyd. And so I just wanted to kind of pin that there. But I'm gonna jump to the movie so that those who, if were able to see it, or those who've seen it, Ryan Coogler laid up in my mother's house for weeks on top of weeks, and went through pictures and asked a lot of questions and met all of Oscar's friends and his co-workers and his employers and his teachers, his ministers, his pastors, anybody that knew him, for him to really get this idea of who Oscar was. And then reached out to Michael B. Jordan, who he thought was a great actor, to become the person that would portray Oscar in the movie. And of course, Michael B. Jordan did a tremendous job, but the movie is 98% accurate. So it's not something he just coined in his head and thought about and just made. That movie was right on point to the life of Oscar, with a few pieces that highlighted some aspect of Oscar. But I just wanted, the viewers to know, because people ask that question, is it true, or what was true, or what wasn't true? It's 98% accurate. Ryan Coogler spent a lot of time at our house and going over the families. And as you know, that was his first real screening, and it took off. And it highlighted the everyday life of that could have been your nephew, your son, your brother, your friend, your cousin. And so thank you, Brock, for sharing the Fruitvale Station, because it's still relevant today. Because what we see is a lot of young nephews and sons and even young fathers are being killed wrongfully by the police. Right. What I'm gonna do now is I'm just gonna jump to the trial and what happened, and it's gonna lead us to where we at today. Of course, Tony Peroni, the one that you spoke about that we have reopened the case on, right. The district attorney that was representing the family wanted us to allow him to use Tony Peroni as state evidence against Johannes Mesley for the murder of Oscar Grant. Now, we was trapped in emotion, and of course, we trusted the DA. We've learned a whole lot since then, but we thought he was working on our behalf. But in essence, they freed everyone by the manipulation of the system. So Tony Peroni turned a hostile witness, never really testified to give any real reverence to what he was going to be used for. And because it failed, the district attorney announced to us that we'll get him after the trial of Johannes Mesley. Of course, when the trial ended with Joanna's Mesley, we went to District Attorney Head Nancy O'Malley to make the demand that she filed charges on Tony Peroni for the murder of Oscar Grant. And of course, she said Alameda County ran out of money. They don't have the money. And therefore, because the trial was moved to LA, it cost them so much that they couldn't afford to do it at this time. We was brokenhearted. We went away. About a year and a half later, we came back making the demand again that she filed charges on Tony Peroni. Tony Peroni, I must knew something was going to happen. He went into the military. So he went into the military and it put what it called almost like a stay. I forgot what the word is, but it stops everything, even statute of limitations, when you leave the country. But you can't be charged for no crime until you come back to the United States. And of course, he stayed gone about almost 4 years in the military. And so that's when we were told that, again, we can't do anything until he comes back to the United States. And so, of course, almost 4 years later, he comes back to the United States. Now they don't basically allowed him to get away because they say, well, the way the judge tied the case up, we're not going to be able to win it, but we can get him criminally for California unemployment fraud, which he beat that case too. But anyhow, I mean, we wanted murder charges found on him, not a criminal case of fraud from the state of California, right. But that's what they gave us, right? And they lost that. They didn't even win. So now here he's still walking around free. And then, of course, all the lobbying that we've been doing for years, in 2015, we got AB 71, which is use of force data collection through the California Department of Justice that tells us how many people are being killed per year. And for for the listeners, in the state of California is the most deadliest state in the country. We average 150 to 175 folks being killed every single year. Since Oscar's murder, over 1,300 Californians has been killed by the police in this state. It's documented. We have the data to show exactly what I'm saying is true. So there's no ifs, ands, about it. But that's because of the blessing of being able to get that legislation passed to show the data. We also made the argument that it was more Black folks, people of color, that was reaping this pain and this trauma. And so we passed AB 953, was the Racial Identification Profiling Act, because we wanted demographics taken up on every stop, every encounter with the police. Who is it that's being stopped? And what is the result after that stop? And the stats is telling us up close to 50% that if you get pulled over by the police as a Black man, you may not make it home that night. That's just how bad it was here in the state, or still is. And so we made this argument about transparency, and we got SB 1421 passed, which is the right to know. And it's that legislation that was key to us being able to reopen our case. In that legislation, which was retroactive rather than prospective, they took it all the way to the California Supreme Court and lost, granted us the right to be able to request this file back in 2009 when Oscar was murdered. And embedded in that file, now, just so the audience to know, the BART Transit Agency hired a investigative firm, a law firm called Myers Nave, that did an investigation on how and why Oscar was murdered. But that was confidential document that was between the client, BART, and his attorney, Myers Nave. So it wasn't, for the public to know. Well, with the right to know legislation that passed, when I made that public records request, I got all that. And embedded in that report is what Tony Peroni did on that platform. And it was clear now that we had the evidence to show that he should be charged for felony murder according to the investigation. And that's where we're at today with that. We hired and were able to get Bennett Amalu, Amalu Bennett, who is the pathologist that played in the movie, or Will Smith played him in the movie Concussion. He's going over the autopsy report now, because Oscar 7 suffered 7 felonious acts by Tony Peroni before he was murdered. And those acts are all conducive to him being charged for felony murder because it was on a continuance of his actions that brought about the murder of Oscar Grant. And then it explicitly states in the Myers-Narvey report how heinous, egregious his acts were. That was the reason why Oscar was murdered. And so that's where we at today with the case. That's somewhat of the history of how we got where we at today. Um, I'm sure, I missed saying whatever, but I'm hoping that there's some questions I can fill in the gap.
There's a few questions already. One, and I have some myself, but one question from the audience, Jamila Counts on the line, the sister of Emmett Till family, the sister of Erica Taylor.
Oh, okay.
Who, you and I both know. I know you knew her very well.
Yes.
R.I.P. Anyways, her question was, do you have a petition in place to reopen the case? So or I guess how did you go about it?
Right. So we do have a petition. We actually have 2 petitions out. You can go to www.justiceforoscargrant.com. We started the petition right at the beginning of the year, and I think it's over 70,000 assigned. Matter of fact, we took 50,000 names and dropped it on the district attorney desk. So that's the petition. The case has been reopened. A quick history on why and how the case got reopened. When we made the demand on October 5th that the case be reopened, she immediately reopened the case during the press conference that we had, which was huge. It kind of shocked us because we was not expecting that, but it happened. And of course, all types of speculators came out saying it was a political move. The statute of limitations done ran out. I mean, every excuse you can have was the reason why she said she would reopen the case. And some of it is legitimate excuses, and others are challenging excuses, like the statute of limitation. There's no statute of limitation on felony murder. But she's not going to charge felony murder. She's going to charge a felony assault or something, which is a 7-year, statute of limitation. So she already know that you can't win. But if this autopsy report comes back and it shows Oscar suffered what the Myers-Narvey report states he suffered, we're going to win this case. And Tony Peroni will be charged. And this will set a precedent throughout this country that these officers that create this heinous act and cause loved ones to be murdered can and will be charged for the murders they commit, even if they at that time got away like Tony Peroni. And so this is huge. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you this question. Maybe, I don't know, you could tell me, because, this, even the demand to pursue reopening the case, wasn't something you'd hear a lot about, in the past, but it's become more of something that a lot of families talk about. I know we had this march in Minneapolis in July earlier of last year, where a lot of families came from all over the country, and I know you were there as well, where that was a central demand. And I just wondered if that, influenced you at all in the timing of what you were going to do, or was this just something you were planning all along? Either way, it's cool, but I just think it's a good thing that more people are talking about it now.
Right. Well, you know what happened? That same need, and I didn't go into the explicit detail of what happened on that platform, but quickly, when Oscar was thrown to the platform floor, and his hands behind his back to be handcuffed, Tony Peroni had his knee on Oscar's neck and his hand on his face, and his knee was choking Oscar out. So Oscar was saying, I can't breathe. This is all picked up in the video. He cracked the bones in his facial face by pushing his face on the concrete floor. See what I'm saying? The Tony Peroni is 6'1", 250 pounds. Johannes Mesley was 6'7", 270 pounds. Oscar had almost 600 pounds of officer on his back. Tony Peroni punched Oscar, elbowed Oscar, threw Oscar against the wall, caused a brain contusion, edema up under the eye. He called Oscar a bitch ass nigga 3 times before he was murdered. So we can go on about what Tony Peroni did, but the knee on George Floyd's neck hurt me so bad that Oscar's face vividly rose, and there that knee was on Oscar's neck. Mm-hmm. Now, we did not pay that as much of attention when Oscar was murdered because he was shot with a gun. You hear what I'm saying? So that knee at that time didn't mean anything. But when the Myers-Narvey report came out in 2019, right before George Floyd was murdered, and in that report, it talked about what Tony Peroni did. And then we witnessed all of a sudden George Floyd be murdered with that knee. It couldn't do nothing but take us back all the way to what happened to Oscar and said, you know what? If Oscar had not been shot, he would have died with that knee on his neck, just like Angelo Quintos, a young Filipino, just recently, we went to the protest yesterday, was killed the same exact way. George Floyd is not the first, and Angelo is not the second. There are many others that died with that same technique. So that prompted us to make this demand that she reopen this case and charge Tony Peroni for the murder of Oscar Grant, because had not Mesley shot him, chances are Oscar would have died from that knee on his neck, because he was saying he couldn't breathe and he suffered facial fractures from the pressure he was putting on his face. He was viciously inflicting pain on Oscar.
Right.
What was heinous about Officer Calvin and the way he did it, he just choked him out almost like with a smile on his face with his hands in his pocket. Like, this is, I don't even have to push your face through the concrete floor. I'm gonna just choke you to death. And so that round, that, you can imagine what it did. But anyhow, so the demand was made. And yes, in Minnesota, when we was hearing that, that began to also prompt, you know what? This gotta be done.
That's good to hear, because I think that's an interesting thing, and I've seen it in other cases, but the fact is, they didn't look into it until you demanded it, you know what I'm saying? So, like, right. Unless we said something, they weren't going to do anything.
Exactly. Exactly.
And plus, we're proving that by them doing it, they could have been doing it all along. They could have looked into it all along. You know right. what I'm saying? So that's the other side of it too, So anyways, I hope that, we definitely support you, 1,000% mass action against police brutality out here in Boston. We want to see these cops held accountable for what they do, and really think that's central to any real change happening, because you can, move things around, but if you really don't deal with the heart of the issue, it's still going to be infected. So,
right.
So, along those lines, I talked to you earlier that we were trying to encourage around the country cities to take up, especially with the families in their city, the demand to, popularize reopening the case, to prosecute the police. There's a lot of cases that never went to trial, and
right.
And sometimes, these DAs, we saw this case here in Boston. They're starting to look into a case. It's 10, 12 years old. Why didn't you? So, it wasn't about anything legally that stopped them. They just didn't want to do it. They didn't want to do their job. So there's that aspect of it, that I think is a big part of this fight, which is just comes down to the political pressure, which is kind of like, I don't want to say, it's just, it's another way to solve the problem, put it like that.
Mm-hmm.
But we see where these laws can also help, open up some new avenues, So that's pretty encouraging, some of things you've been able to do on that level. I know a lot of people are trying to figure out is there any kind of laws that can actually address the situation. You know what I'm saying? So obviously there's so many on the books already that, are arcane in so many states. So
You're
some are different than others. I know. Right? You don't have like a Bill of Rights or anything in California, right? But some of these states have that, right?
No, we have. That's
Officer
what
Bill of
made
Rights.
yeah,
Yeah.
the peace officers Bill of Rights called ProBar, which
Uh-huh.
is a shield that has kept police officers from ever being charged for the murders they commit in this state. That's why California is one of the most secretive states in the nation. We're one of four now that still don't even have decertification legislation on the books. So, I was talking about the legislation that we help sponsor and pass. One of the other ones was AB 748, which is the audio release within 45 days, video and audio release in 45 days. And then, of course, last year, we were able to get through the legislators AB 392. I'm sorry, the year before, AB 392, which is the most strictest use of force legislation in the nation. And we changed what a reasonable officer would have done under the same circumstances. That reasonable standard has been changed to a necessary standard. And now the officers can be held criminally liable. The totality of the event is looked at. Uh, I forget the other aspect, but the key point in this is that for the first time in the last 12 years since Oscar's murder, two officers now have been charged charged for murder, but they haven't been found guilty yet. They still have to go to trial, and that's Stephen Taylor and Saliandro and Nicholas Bell out of San Diego. Both of the district attorneys said they had to charge them based on the standard of AB 392, which is the most strictest use of legislation that passed. So that's finally given us some leverage to get these officers arrested. And the transparency bill is revealing to us now just how many officers exist on the police force that are criminals, have no business being there. Like Tony Peroni, for all we know, because nobody seemed to know where he's at today, is working for a policing agency under probably a different name. We know for a fact Johannes Mesley changed his name. So these officers that kill in the state of California just go to another agency somewhere in the state, maybe even out of the state, and they even change their name so that they don't have to live with the baggage of people protesting them when they find out they're in their city. And so this is what we go through here in the state of California when it comes to dealing with police officers. And the bill that you guys just passed, the decertification legislation, even though we're looking at it, we now have enough leverage to get our it was AB or SB 731. They changed it because it failed last year, but this year's SB 2 is a decertification piece of legislation. And of course, we looked at every piece of decertification legislation in this nation. Some are good and some were just weak, because a lot of this stuff, as you know, police unions fight so hard to make it look like you were doing, they're giving up something when they're not giving up anything. But if ours passed, it would have the strength today to create what we hope, where an officer that either quit to not suffer the repercussions of a lawsuit or what have you, can't just go get hired in another agency in the state of California, and definitely can't go get hired in another agency out of state. Right now, we get everything. Masso, who killed Alan Bluford, came from New York from a shooting. Got to Oakland, kills Alan Bluford. He gets run out of Oakland. He goes to Hollister. People find out that he's in Hollister, and he finally goes out on a medical leave. We get this all the time in the state of California. The shooters come to the California, they shoot somebody else, and then they transfer within the state. We got the Vallejo Police Department, just so that you know, got about 100 police officers. That's it. It's a small city, but about 50 of them have already shot individuals, and over 1/3 of them has been involved in more than one shooting or more than one shooting that created a murder. So, we have we have some real characters in this state that, we're hoping that legislation can help curb or stop all the unnecessary pain that's coming out of these murders that these families are experiencing.
Right, right. Thanks. We got a couple more questions or one comment. Um, one question is, when is the next court date
So,
around?
right. So since the case been reopened, what we have is meetings with the DA because the district attorney has to make the decision whether she's going to file charges or not. Everything right now is hinging on Bennett Amalu, the pathologist that's doing the autopsy and examining the autopsy of Oscar's murder, because our case is sitting on the felonious act of Tony Peroni. And so once he completes his analysis and investigation into the autopsy report and bring us the report, then we'll call for a meeting with Nancy O'Malley. Once we have the meeting with Nancy O'Malley, she should, we believe, will announce that charges against Tony Peroni for felony murder can be filed. And once that happens, of course, then court dates will show up. But right now, there's no court date. We're still in the battle just to make it happen. But you can believe that every policing agency in this country, especially the Peace Officer Bill of Rights and all the presidents, are gathering, having conversation about this reopening of this case and making sure that it doesn't happen because of the repercussions of what's going to happen all across the United States. So we fighting a beast. You can imagine that no one wants to see this happen, but we got the evidence for it to happen.
Oh, that's cute. That's beautiful. So yeah, I guess that's one question I had was um in this fight to get, I guess it kind of is what I just asked you, but this this idea of reopening the case is somewhat, even though it's always been a legal kind of avenue, it's, I think maybe never even been thought of as a realistic avenue. Maybe like a lot of the attitude is once it was looked at, and they didn't do anything, that's it, So
right.
I really feel like, yeah, it is a big can of worms, especially because this case is now happened in 2009. I mean, in another decade, so
right,
kind of just shows that the past never really goes away, and a lot of these scores still need to be settled, and
right,
we know like that at least there's a sentiment that runs deep, in the people, but sometimes it gets beat out of us to the point where we just kind of give up, So I think that, yeah, I agree. I think this is monumental in all these cases to reopen, past cases of police brutality are, you know, just a big
mm-hmm.
domino,
right,
potential domino in the chain. So because so many are affected, so many people in the same boat.
right.
One of the things we're finding too is a lot of times they do want to hinge it on new evidence,
Mm-hmm.
but even in a lot of the existing evidence in a lot of these cases, there's probable cause to indict. I think of
Right,
like the Mike Brown case, or the Tamir
right,
Rice case, anything like these
right,
cases should be reopened, based on the evidence that already exists. But when you have even more, that's even more compelling. So that's good for your situation. I know we have some at least one family here in Boston who's kind of getting ready to approach the DA with some new evidence that came out in the civil trial that she had.
right. And
So
and
yeah, it's rough.
that's so critical. But yeah, go ahead, Brock. Yeah.
No, that's all I had. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah. Well, definitely. I mean, of course, the audience there, the activists there, you can go and continue to support. Because we definitely want the petition to continue to build. And so when we actually go back for our next meeting, we could drop this is not no isolated, Oakland only issue that this district attorney has to deal with. This is a national issue where everybody eyes is watching this case, and that it's going to take public pressure to
Right.
actually make it happen. And so we're counting on the nation to sign that petition, to make the calls. I mean, the I forget who it was called us and said their phone has been driving them crazy, but that's what has given us the leverage to make sure that she understands that this is not, something that's happening behind closed doors. We have a dream team of attorneys. We have, of course, John Burrs, Walter Riley, Charles Bonner, Lee Meredith's looking at it, Judge Hackett or Attorney Hackett now, Benjamin Crump. All of them has looked at and been advising us on what they have garnered from looking at the Myers-Narvik report. So it's not like, a felony murder charge can't be charged. His act, egregious ways of what he did on that platform to Oscar justifies felony murder to be filed. The district attorney is resting on the fact that the autopsy report that they looked at doesn't have the wounds or the damages that the Myers-Narvik report states. But the Myers-Narvik report came from somewhere. They have an autopsy report, and you cannot pick a sheriff autopsy report over another autopsy report without comparing them both and make a decision that you want to use one because it leans to what you want. And so this is why Dr. Amalu is so critical in this process, because the reevaluation now is going to determine the direction that we should go based on his facts. And if his facts show exactly what we're saying, then there's no reason why she can't reopen the case or file we'll put it this way, file felony murder charges on Tony Peroni because the case has been reopened.
Right,
But
right, right.
but what if she don't? And the evidence are clear. That is another step that we have to take, and then we have to analyze where we would go from there. Of course, Oscar's civil rights was violated. Now we're talking about the Department of Justice.
That's
You
what
know,
I wanted to ask you is the Department of Justice. I mean, did the previous DOJ, the AGs that were sitting, did they make an official determination on the case, like to not file charges, or was it just no investigation, no was ever finished?
right. So, and it's interesting you asked that question because when Oscar was murdered, of course, we demanded that the Department of Justice get involved, and they got involved. They started investigating the case. We were at the Black Lives Matter conference. I was presenting there with a couple of workshops and stated that the Department of Justice still not has responded to the family concerning the murder of Oscar Grant. Because remember, our focus was on Tony Peroni. I'm not Tony Peroni, Johannes Mesley, who shot Oscar, because we
Right.
still felt he should have got more time. Really, again, knowing what Tony Peroni did, but not really having the emphasis of him being charged. But anyway, and I made that statement at that workshop that I'm presenting. About a month later, they sent, I think it was a letter or mail, whatever, and said that based on their evidence, that there cannot file no charges against Johannes Mesley. Remember, this is they only focused on Johannes Mesley, and so it was like I brought it back to their attention in 2015, the latter part of the year. They decided finally not to file charges, but we never focused on Tony Peroni and his egregious act. So this is a whole new level of investigation that's going to take place because
Right.
again, Oscar's civil rights was violated. He was called a
Right.
bitch ass nigga. They already claiming that various acts of those felonious acts are statute of limitation issues. But felony murder, there's no statute of
Mm.
limitation. So any
Right.
family that have lost a loved one to the hands of the police by murder, right? There's no statute of limitation to hold those other officers that may
Exactly.
have been on the scene accountable.
So I know I mean, I know you were down in DC during August at the Lincoln Memorial. I know
Yes.
you probably at least heard that some of us, we decided to march to the DOJ, not to the Lincoln or to MLK statue. And when we got there, it was really good. Was thousands went that way as well. There was, tens of thousands out there. It was crazy, but demanding exactly that these cases be reopened, that the DOJ and take this up, and it applies, to all these families. I know recently I talked with Samaria Rice. They just told her that they're not going to investigate. That was the, Barr's administration, but you know, there's a new AG, so let
Right.
them look into it. So it doesn't really end the fight. Reopen the case to me is a kind of a rallying cry that keeps a lot of these families, focused on something,
Right.
something they can fight for.
Right.
And it's not just them, just the community as a whole, because people want to see these fights win, and when there's kind of an impasse, then people don't know what to do, and everybody kind of gets wrapped up in whatever else they're doing, and the
Mm-hmm.
things move on, and the fight lose momentum. People start forgetting about it. But with this now, I think that's the difference too. Like a lot of these fights, like I mean, your fight is 11, 12 years old now, but
Right.
it's still very much a galvanizing force in the community,
Right.
and I think that's more the case in a lot of other cities for a lot of these families who've been affected in the same way. So to me, I guess that's encouraging. I mean, uh, that something can come out of this senseless death, that people can start to come together and, just build a different kind of society. So to me, that's what this is all about. To me, that's why I'm involved, and definitely just want to thank you again for all the work you do. I know, you know, it's not a given. So, and it's, not always, a lot of people paying attention, and a lot of these things, the cameras come and go, but the
If I could
pain
share,
remains. Yeah,
right.
go ahead.
If I was going to share, um, since Oscar murder, we've been working with families all over the country, and even families over in London. Actually been there and worked with families there. But and as you actually came, and Hope came, and Rahima came.
Yep.
I don't know if anyone else. I can't remember right off the top of my head if any other family came from Boston, but
Tahia.
we had
That job. Yeah.
yeah, we had about 175 impacted families at that conference. And the year before, we had it in Oakland at Merritt College, the birthplace of the Black Panthers. We had like 102 families, which was huge in itself. And then before that, we had it at Wayne State in Detroit, where we had almost 50 families, And so I'm just saying that to say, the next one we plan to have will be this year in San Diego.
Oh yeah.
We have the dates targeted for October 1st through the 3rd. Of course, we're in the planning and the making of that happening. But if Corona, COVID allows us to have it, you know what I'm saying? This crisis is watered down
It's
to
good to
such
know.
a point, then families can come. We will move forward with it. So it all hinges on that. But, sadly, though we hate to see these numbers grow, the police hasn't stopped killing us yet. And these new families that's been impacted are empowered when they come to these type of conferences. It's sadly these mothers and these family members and these fathers, we all bond. It's called bonded by blood but united in love. And you walk away from these conferences with new friendship, new loved one, new family members, because we're in this for life. You know, there it's a huge thing to see a family smile because we know this pain is forever, but also to see a family embrace another family and help build their spirit back up and become bonded. That that in itself seals that strength to keep going. And and you said something that was key earlier, and that is, you know, the idea that your loved one was murdered and they said it was a justifiable homicide, and the Department of Justice claims that they can't file charges because the local entity didn't file charges or didn't find no reason to find charges, and then it's like your case is dead. But the idea that it could be reopened based on the evidence that happened then, and even if it's acquired new evidence happening today, gives a whole new ray of hope, and it revitalized those families that kind of stepped back feeling as if their struggle was over. It's never over. The wheels of justice turn slow, but as long as we are optimistic and staying prayerful and staying centered in the way that we have to make sure that we're staying healthy, we can continue to move forward. And as long as we move forward in a mass movement, systemic change will come. And you see it happening all around the country. That's why George Floyd was so huge, because people are consciously are waking up to this heinous act and now feeling like they need to be involved because it's real. We heard a white man say at the killing of Angelo Quintus, a young Filipino guy that we went to yesterday. He works for Gavin Newsom, the governor, but it brought him to tears to see what happened to this young man. And for the audience, he was in a mental state crisis. His mother cuddled him in her room on her floor, holding him down, but yet called the 911. The police comes, goes into her house, takes her son out of her arms, put their knee on his neck, and they kills this young Filipino in front of his mama when all she was asking for was help. And they took him out of her arms. And the next door neighbor, the white gentleman, was so impacted. You hear what I'm saying? That it's actually now really bringing in an audience, and not an audience, but a new spirit of folks that just never really seen this type of madness. They seeing it at a distance, but it's hitting right next door now. So you have no right to be silent about this issue, because if you're silent, you're culpable. That's why it's going to take a mass movement to bring about real systemic change. And that's where we're at today with this, and so, I thank your audience for spending the time to take a look at Fruitvale Station. It's an older movie. It's one of the first. It was a first in its time, just like Oscar was the first with technology. Matter of fact, Oscar was the catalyst of the movement that we see happening today. But understanding that process helps us understand how to move today also through this struggle. And so that's what this is all about. This is we're gonna win. I believe that. I've been fighting for 12 years, and to be honest, I'm not even tired. The wife and I will go wherever we can. If God allows us to get there, we will be there to stand with families. Of course, COVID put a real troublesome, struggle in this madness, but we're all learning how to use Zoom, effectively today. You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah.
When you mentioned it to me, the first thing I thought about was I told her wife we going to Boston, right? We coming, but I didn't think at the moment that it could be Zoom. You hear what I'm saying? And so,
right.
And this works fine too, because the whole idea is to get the message out, have the audience to hear, some to develop the empathy to understand that this is a movement that we all need everybody involved in. And as everybody lines up and get involved, then real systemic change will come. And that's what we stand on. That's what we believe.
Right on. Appreciate that. And that was kind of a question you mentioned. So in October, hopefully, there'll be another gathering of families. We look forward to that. Somebody asked about, other demonstrations. You talked about the mass movement. I just wanted to make an announcement here for now for people on the call. And I know I spoke a little bit to you about this, Cephas. This is one thing coming up. It's the trial of George Floyd is in a couple of weeks now, March 8th. Across the country, we're trying to see if communities will stand with the families, impacted families affected in their community, to demand that police be prosecuted, that cases be reopened, in solidarity as well with the George Floyd case, demanding those officers be convicted for their crimes. In Boston, we're going to be doing it at Terrence Coleman Park Saturday, March 6th, across the country. Also, we put out another call to try to do another simultaneous national demonstration centering the families and their demands, May 24th, which is the 1 year anniversary of the murder of George Floyd. And I guess with that, I'm gonna let you go and really thank you so much for your time. Hopefully we can do this again if there's another update and send the support towards this fight. At the next big juncture. But in any case, we'll be continuing building with you, trying to unite with these families, trying to get justice. And I guess that's it.
Well, definitely send my love. I'm not sure of Hope or Hemozan or any of the other families, but from the Oscar Grant family, we definitely send our love and, of course, our condolences and our support, our solidarity. And we definitely, as you know, Brock, want the families to be a part of the conference because it's such a powerful experience. We've learned and watched and seen families turn their lives around and become, leaders, because we're finally at the table. You know what I'm saying? We've been changing laws here in the state of California. And it's only going to get better as more of on a national level, that is, as more of us understand the power that we have when we unite. And you said it earlier too, we got various family-led organizations all over this country now are starting to finally center themselves to where once we understand the unification process, mass demonstration in each state across this country is going to be huge. Like what we saw when we went to Minnesota. You know, you know, and that's what my hope is. So we definitely will be talking about how we can be involved and how we can definitely have the state of California and various parts of the state of California involved and having demonstrations because we do want Officer Chauvin and those additional officers charged for the murder of George Floyd. I mean, the visual is there. It was callous, it was heinous, it was egregious, and it was wrong. The man shouldn't have never been choked out, and yet we're dealing with a system by design that has purposely always denied us that right to real justice. And part of the reason why we don't get it is a lot of times because we're not as outspoken about it. But I believe when we come together and make that demand, because this system sadly is gonna implode with our failure to do the right thing.
Exactly.
You hear what I'm saying? With our failure to do the right thing, there's gonna be an implosion. And so let's, do what we got to do to make this happen. It's about time.
Right on. I just want to give a shout out to one of the family members on the screen that joined the call. You haven't met yet, but just want to encourage everybody to support the Root family. We got Jennifer Root, the sister of Justin Root, who was killed by Boston police last year. We're actually working with the Root family to do a demonstration next Saturday at the state capitol. 1 year anniversary, demanding that they reopen that case and charge the officers that killed Justin Root. 31 shots.
31 shots.
Ground, bleeding profusely. So, yeah. So thank you for that. Let me try to get There we go.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna unmute Jennifer. Are you there? I'm gonna unmute you. Can you talk? Yeah, there.
Oh, yeah.
That's
Hi. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
And Uncle Bobby, I heard everything you said in the last 15 minutes, and I am there with you. I have always said this from the get-go, together we're stronger. We need more people to step up and stand in, but it's a together movement because that is the only way we're actually going to be able to get over that line.
Right.
And obviously, you know, a little bit over a year ago, I would have never imagined life the way it is, or even to know that officers could do that many bullets from 5 feet away. Is it's very it's extremely disturbing, and they continue to do it. They're continuing to do it, but more of us are standing up. So, and I think I'm really looking forward to March 6th and May 24th, and really trying to find out how can we reach more people across the United States so we can really have a big bang,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
And I'm sorry I joined late. I had to get my kids, and then the snow. There's a lot of snow here.
Oh, I can imagine.
The roads.
Boston, yeah. Yeah.
well. All right. Well, we're gonna have you here in Boston eventually. You know, I know we've been talking about it. So yeah, COVID. You know, but whatever.
Yeah.
And definitely plan to be wherever San Diego, I guess, in October.
Yeah.
In July.
Yeah.
You know?
Start
So,
galvanizing the families because we working
yeah.
now to make it happen. And of course, part of the goal is that these families don't have to spend any money. They just need to come. And that's
Right.
what this is about because we can get them there. We can get them the tools and things to help build them up. They just only go back home stronger. And so we don't want no stress on them getting here and where they gonna sleep, all that, God's willing, and it's all gonna be paid for. It's gonna take, organizations like yourself, Brock, to help make that happen. You know what I'm saying? So, but we're gonna definitely do our part. You know.
Definitely, yeah. I'm sure we plan to attend. You know, we'll
Yeah.
just keep us in the loop, and definitely, I know it, made a big impact on Hope and Rahima to just meet so many of the other families across the country. So, I think Jamila, do you have your hand up? I can. But we want to let our guests go too, so I'm gonna wrap it up. But Jamila, I'm gonna let you be the last question if I can find you up here. I think she. Oh, here we go. I'm gonna unmute you.
Okay.
There you go. Thank you,
All
sister.
right. Hi, Uncle Bobby.
Hello, Camilla.
In honor of Erica Gordon Taylor, I would like to come on board and say my condolences. I am so glad that we're friends on Facebook. Any way that I can help and get involved is my intention. Please reach out to me and let's connect. Okay, Uncle Bobby? Tell the wife
Yeah,
I'm here. And
Okay.
I'm trying to put my boots on the ground. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Hey, along those lines, people that want to stay in touch with Mass Action, and I guess you could direct message Uncle Bobby on the chat here, but you can direct message me, Mass Action, leave your email, and we'll keep you updated. Next week, we're going every Friday. We also, try to talk about historical stuff. We're going to be talking about the Deacons for Defense next Friday as part of Black History Month as well.
Hey, Brock, can I give our website right before I go?
Yeah, please, yes.
Yeah, so our Families United for Justice website is www.fu4jnetwork.org. And of course, our primary org is the Love Not Blood campaign, which is www.lovenotbloodcampaign.org.
All right. Let's try to get that. Love Not Blood campaign.
Yes.
I'm going to put that in the chat. But what was the first one again? www.
Yeah, FU4, J network.org.
Network. Okay.
Yeah.
Families United for Justice.
That's right.
For those
It's a
that don't know.
network of families all over this country and over in London too. A lot of the families are connected, with our struggle. I mean, because they're suffering sadly the same pain.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming. Thank you, Cephas, Uncle Bobby, everyone. Give it up for the Oscar Grant family. Let's stay at the ready and keep ready for a big push to reopen this case. It's reopened to charge the officer, actually.
That's right.
To charge Peroni and show that a case can be reopened and justice can be served after the fact, after it wasn't served. And that's kind of a big message for the population and for the powers that be too, and why they don't want that Pandora's box open. But
hey, did you stream this to your Facebook page? Well, just stream?
I think it's streamed to YouTube. Streamed to YouTube. Yeah.
Okay. What's the title on the YouTube?
Well, just Mass Action Against Police Brutality. If you just check the YouTube channel, you should be able to find it. I don't really know what the title that the live is under right now.
Okay, Mass Action Police Brutality.
Against Police Brutality. Yeah.
Got it. Okay.
And I'll get you a link. Regardless. Sometimes we chop it up after the fact to make it a little bit more shareable.
Right.
But yeah, this was good. We try to keep doing these things. And hopefully, yeah, I hope to see a lot of these families not only uniting together in October, but in action simultaneous as a force in this country, in this movement. And I think, there's a lot that can be done in that direction. So let's see what happens, but that's one element I do trust in this whole chaos is the families and the integrity they have for their own fight for justice. So I think that could be a guiding light, for all of society, So. All right, well, we're out here. We did it again. Mass Action Podcast. See y'all next week, hopefully. And Cephas, we'll see you out here somewhere fighting for justice, these families in the trenches.
All right. Goodbye to everybody. Okay.
All right, everyone. And we out. Let me see. I might be able to share one thing before we're out for those who want to stick around. But otherwise, it's been real, y'all. Thank you for dealing with the technical difficulties. We'll get it worked out. It's grassroots, but we're committed to doing this now weekly. Next week, we will be watching Deacons for Defense, and you will be able to see it on the screen. And that's my word. So mass action, everybody.
Watch my back, I'm under attack, you got my back. I got your back. Watch my back, I'm under attack, you got my back. You got my back. You got my back. You got my back. I got your back. You got my back. I got your back. You got my back. You got my back. I got your back. You got my back. I got your back. You got my back. You got my back. I got your back. You got my back. Okay. No justice, no peace. Prosecute the police. No justice, no peace. Peace. Prosecute the police. Please. No justice, no peace. Please. Prosecute the police. Please. No justice, no peace. Prosecute the police. No justice, no peace. Prosecute the police.